Hello, welcome to the studio. Today, I'm going to show you how I paint a floral. We are going to do this in real time. You can paint along if you'd like. I have watercolor paper. You can also use mixed media. I have a couple of my favorite pencils. These are the Pitt oil base or Caran d'Ache oil base pencils in Sanguine. We've got Caran d'Ache Neo Pastels. This is my favorite tool. You can get a basic color set with a really nice range or buy them individually to build out kind of a custom palette. I have various brushes right here. And today I'll be painting with acrylic, but using it with water in a sort of washy way. So if you have acrylic paints or gouache, even if you have, a student grade watercolor, you're gonna be able to get some things done here. And Posca markers. This is kind of a wild card tool I fell in love with in the past couple years. So I'm gonna put a picture right up in the screen somewhere of the flowers that are sitting right in front of me. I like to go to the store and buy some flowers or go to a local farmer and buy an arrangement. And that's what I paint for my monthly editions of flowers. Okay, so to get started, you may be using, this is 6 by 8 inches. You might have 9 by 12, work whatever size you want, and then just play with scale. There's no wrong way of doing this. So take your pencil, you can even use a mechanical pencil if that's what you've got, and go through and we're gonna work with the contour lines. So pick one spot on the photo you're working with or the flowers in front of you and gaze upon it. And now some people at art school, you do a lot of contour line drawing in art school, and they're gonna tell you go really slow. I don't go slow anymore. And what we're doing is following the main lines of what we see. And whenever I'm painting flowers, my mission is not to make it realistic. I'm not a realistic painter. My work is really gestural, it is very colorful, and it's a delight. So we're just kind of going through. You can gaze upon your paper occasionally, but don't judge the marks you're making. You're really just working in shapes, and you can go over things. This is going to help give shape to your general composition, which you're working with the floral arrangement. It's beautiful already, right? You don't have to think so hard about stuff. Got some hypericum right here. And let's work with this eucalyptus. I love doing leaf shapes. It's so gratifying. It's one of my favorite marks to make, really, and always has been. And we don't have to be really literal either. If you're looking at your composition and feeling like there are some empty spots that you want to do something about, just adapt what you're seeing with your eyes. The aim is not perfection, and it never should be. Okay. And then just loosely we have a vessel, and I'm going with a different shaped vessel than what I actually have for the sake of composition. And then I always like to just kind of put a line there. This is very signature of how I do my floral paintings. I love seeing a line for the ground. Okay, so next, let's get started with, let's just get some paint going. So these are student grade brushes. You can get them anywhere. And I am not precious with my brushes. I'm very hard on them, so I'm not a brush snob. Let's see, let's start with some green. This is sap green. It's one of my favorite colors. I'm mixing it with a little bit of a lighter green. I'm feeling the eucalyptus right now. And it's not that I'm filling in the shapes, I'm just depositing color. Because really this whole process is about layering. I find that most people, whether you think you're an artist or not, most people really stop a little short of letting it build up texture and layers, and it can leave your work feeling or looking a little flat. I would advise people, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make marks. Don't be afraid to make even ugly marks, because you can always go back over it. And you'll see, I'm not really painting inside the lines at all. This is really, I'm moving around, I'm hitting color values that are in the same range. Got this lovely peony here. Let's see, that Hypericum has like this pretty purple red. So I'm taking some violet, some Van Dyke red, and some naphthol to create this purpley. And I think painting is really like a play of mark making, a play of color, a play of like softening the gaze and focusing. Let's go ahead and paint in those berries. Again, I'm just depositing color. And there's a little bit of green at the base. And look, I don't really wash my brushes between things either, but I'm consciously thinking about how I'm building the color. So at a certain point, swirling all these colors up, you do get a little muddy, and that's when you would really vigorously swish out your brush. Swish, swish. Let's see. Got this light olive green. Got a little too much water there. There. All right, let's play with a different brush. This is another one of my favorite styles of brush, which is, I don't know the technical name for it, but it has this like nice edge. And it can give you some really great control and straight lines. And how I like to use it is, let's see, get some sap green, get rid of a little bit of that water. See how that's giving me some control? And this is an old brush, so it's got that kind of old brush scratchy quality to it. And there. So with this same brush, we're gonna get some nice thick paint on here. Here's the thing, when it comes to a flower, they're comprised of many colors. So I'm looking at this peony, and if you squint your eyes, you can see where a shadow lies. I really like the idea of this kind of gray-green as my, as a shadow. So when I squint my eyes and I'm looking at the peony, I can see where the shadow shapes are. And I'm kind of going in and scribbling where I see those shadow shapes. Ooh. And then I'm actually going to take, I use this color, this kind of periwinkle, what do they call this? Sky blue, bleu lavande. I love using it for a shadow. This is also pretty typical of my work. I really love this color, whether it's the water-soluble Neo Pastel from Caran d'Ache, or the paint, which I always keep on my palette. All right, so giving some shape here. And you can see this one's starting to take some form. Now again, I like to really push and pull from areas, meaning in this instant, I like to go from working with shadow to highlight. Now this is truly a big old a big old brush. Look at this. But I love what it does. Even, you know, not perfect tools can give you really interesting things. Okay, so let's go in with a mid-tone next. Too much yellow on that. Soften it up a bit. Got some unbleached titanium, that'll do nicely. And we're doing kind of the mid-tones. And you may be seeing this now and being like, that doesn't look like a flower. Again, this is about building out the shape and the delight. So at this point, sometimes I like to go ahead and deposit the highlights. So I never use straight white. I always kind of temper it with some of these other light hues. Parchment, unbleached titanium, titanium white. And again, squinting my eyes, I can see where those highlight shapes are. And I'm just dropping that on in there. Okay. Let's move on to these kind of like orange puffball flowers. I don't know what they are, but they're delightful. So I'm taking a yellow ochre, this like vermilion, and a light orange. I'm going to show you why I love this tool so much. So it's like a waxy crayon, and it's also like a pastel, but it doesn't smear. And here. Let's get a little bit of, we'll do this. And I find that this works best. Like really commit to putting it to the paper and making a mark. Like you're a kid, not afraid of really scribbling. Okay, and then with this, because I don't want to lose that fringy kind of whatever, I get a really fine tip brush, and we're just kind of playing with it. And this is the gift of that Neo Pastel. I'm actually going to show you next some of the ways that you can use this tool. Okay, so what kind of background are we wanting today? Let's go with the green. I'm feeling green. Yeah, I'm feeling green. It's going to pop. The green's going to pop from the green. So the Neo Pastel, you can really get in here like a crayon, right? And deposit that pigment. Don't be afraid to do it. And I'm actually going to get some of this. These blend together really beautifully too. And that's just dry. With these florals, I like to approach the background like this. And kind of at this point, because I can either work with giving really strong lines, but there's also opportunities to like paint into it as we get later in the process. Now, something I see people doing a lot is making the same types of, myself included, the same types of lines and marks over and over. Are you someone who colors lightly? Are you someone who makes this size mark? I love making this size mark. But can you challenge yourself to get outside of what you usually do and do it in a different way? Okay, so now I'm going to show you the gift of this material. I'm going to come in with that flathead brush again, a little bit of water on it. And look, it's water soluble. It becomes like a wash of gouache or like the acrylic. And the pigment is really dense. You can make it as washy as you want, or really dense like I have it here, depending on how much you scribbled, how much pigment you deposited as you were making your marks. And you can really carry this out really far. You can also go back in where the page is wet. That's a little too wet, so just kind of dragging it around. But where I just barely got this place wet. Play with the different ways to use this. I also recommend never resting your hand on your surface. Not only will it get messy, but it limits your range of motion. Can you work with your forearm off of the surface? It also prevents you from being too particular about the marks. You've got to leave room for magic to happen. You can also come in here with pigment on your brush with this and work into it. You can go over, you can mix into. I mean, truly this material, this medium was a game changer for me. Not just for how I work, but how I make marks and think of pigment and color and mixed media. I also like to kind of go back in with my pencil and make some fine lines too. So this is a watercolor pencil. We're just gonna kind of, you can see how this is beginning to, I'm gonna lift it up for you. You can see how this is beginning to really get some depth and intrigue here, because we've gone over it 3 or 4 times. let's keep going. I'm reclaiming the shapes of these little orange fraggles. They're like Fraggle flowers. Sometimes I like to be quiet. And now while we let some of these flower parts dry, let's play with our vessel. What do I want to do? You know what? Let's make it a blue and white. Let's make it a blue and white vessel. People love that. So I've got Payne's Gray, which is, you know, a really deep, almost black navy. And the whole blue and white thing, there's so many blues out there, y'all. There's so many blues. They're beautiful. And then actually, I'm going to take this blue from my Neo Pastel set and I'm going to kind of scribble a design, thinking of chinoiserie and the various motifs. There might be some waves, there might be a pagoda and a person standing, and then maybe some trees. I've decided I don't really care for that stem, so we got rid of it. And look, I don't have to do this all the way around. Giving the vessel a little more shape. All right. So then we will take our fine tip and we want to do this. Okay, I've mixed a little bit of that periwinkle. I've mixed a little of the periwinkle, a little of the titanium white, and just a touch of the Payne's Gray. I might even use this gray hue, which I can't remember the technical name of. And then we're gonna go in, because this blue that we've put here, we're gonna work around with it and work around it also. The goal is not always to cover all the white area. I think with these, especially with watercolor paper, the way that it works, the way that it holds water, you get so much depth. And this is a watercolor painting technique. You get so much depth through what you don't paint in on the paper. Look, I'm not even necessarily following what I did before. But maybe I am in certain areas. And then I might come back in with a little of the Payne's Gray. We're depositing some shadows here. Again, when we talk about creating depth in a painting, I think so much of the depth happens from using colors in a way that is not expected or not what your eyes would register when you look at something. I'm going to come in with that periwinkle. And listen, I am not so married to this idea that I'm not afraid to work over it, for it to become something else. And again, that push and pull that I talk about. I've gone in for shadow painting and now I'm feeling like, oh, I want some highlight. I'm really letting this skinny little wonky brush tip work for me here. And now I'm thinking, okay, well, it feels like it's floating. Let's put it in space. What color do I want to do? Okay, so I'm getting a little Van Dyke red and a little bit of this, I forget the name of that color. Bronze yellow, chrome oxide, not chrome oxide, yellow oxide, something like that. And maybe a touch of violet. Ooh, maybe a touch of naphthol. Ooh, okay. And like I said, I really, in my work, love to give it a field. I think it was probably influenced by my love of Matisse as a kid, his still lifes and florals, the stuff he painted in the south of France. And okay, now I'm going to take that Payne's Gray and the Van Dyke red. I love the texture. Now, if the color stays, we have yet to see. And then I might come back up here to the Hypericum and add. I hate wasting paint on a brush. And then even though it's not there in the photo, I might add some there for balance. And maybe also right in here. A little violet. And again, you can always cover up something if you change your mind. And look, this is a great tool too. So I just came in and deposited some extra water right there, and almost right away, I'm going to take just a tip of a paper towel, and just to show you, you can't really erase, but you can soak up things if you need to. We're going to let this dry for a minute, and then we're going to come in with a Posca for kind of a mid-painting experiment. All right, we're back. Okay, let's see. So next, we are going to go in with the Posca marker. I always like to test it off paper first, because sometimes these can bleed. So the function of how I'm using this right now is to create more depth of the lines and kind of work through some of these messier areas, give them a little definition. And at this point, I'm referencing the floral arrangement occasionally, but I'm consciously looking at what I am doing, the marks I'm making, and making choices based on what's visually appealing to me. Poscas are acrylic paint in a marker, and you can use them on canvases, you can layer them with your other mediums. All right, and now I'm going to take a lighter colored one and show you a little bit of how we've used a dark color to add shapes. What does it look like to use a lighter shade to kind of work in reverse? So I'm going back into this vaguely chinoiserie-esque. And the Posca tips come in different thicknesses, which allows you to use them in different ways. Go. Now, you'll notice I've cut some of the contrast out of this vessel. I'm going to go in with some white. Now, the peonies are kind of blobby. They're feeling a little blobby. So what I'm going to do is go back in with my pencil from the beginning and once again find those contour lines and looking halfway between the flower in front of me and also taking my gaze back to my pencil on the page so I can see, like, where would a petal naturally fit? Where would this petal shape naturally go? Got some thick paint that's not quite dry. That's all right. I'm also loving the sanguine color next to the cranberry tones of the Hypericum. And you know, the eucalyptus has a touch of that reddish hue to its stems. I think that tucks in really nicely in there. And then I love the control that you have with a Posca tip. And okay, and I'm going to come in with my fine tip brush. With lighter shades of green. And just go almost right over where I just drew those little circles with my Posca. I feel like we need some highlights through here. Again, creating depth. And you may be wondering, like, how does she know where to make these marks? How is she moving so quickly? This whole practice is really about building trust in yourself, in your aesthetic reasoning, but also just your intuitive knowing of what creates beauty, what creates balance. And you'll find as you deepen your practice that you begin making decisions almost definitely intuitively, but almost unconsciously. Like, I like to zoom out my gaze and assess what I'm looking at. Okay, so I want to deal with these peonies. They've been bothering me. Not bothering me, but I'm like, okay, it's time for the peonies. So I've mixed up a few hues. Even though what we're looking at is essentially a white peony, there's like subtle shades of blush and green and a yellowish touch. I want to come in with a smaller brush. Yeah, this smaller brush is giving us a little more control. You don't want to have the same size marks, gestures, brush strokes everywhere. An abstracted flower does really well to have layers of varying sizes of marks and brush strokes. And again, the layers. And when in doubt, squint your eyes. See where the dark shapes are. See where the highlights are. Look how thick that is. I love that. I'm squinting. I'm seeing where those shapes naturally are. And then let's go over to the other. I'm going to take that kind of bigger flat brush, deposit a little more shadow. Here, so you can see me mixing color a little bit. I've taken some parchment, some unbleached titanium, a touch of periwinkle. I must have had yellow on my brush, but look, that hue is pretty good. Squinting, where are the shapes? I need something a little darker, get a little more periwinkle in there. A touch of chromium green. Yeah, okay. Maybe even the lightest touch of Payne's gray, because there's really just shadow on this side of the bulb. Yeah, okay. And don't be afraid to make a big mark. That's very dark, isn't it? I'm not worried about it. All right. Now, let's see. We're going to mix in a new area. Take a little of this warm gray. This, I think it's Titan green. That's a lovely tone. And unbleached titanium. We're depositing kind of mid tones. Okay, and then I'm going to get this nice old brush and come in with some titanium white with a little bit of, I don't remember what the other color is. And again, squint the eyes, see where the highlights are. And don't be afraid to make like ugly marks. Ugly marks amount to beautiful texture. And then on this flower, we're going to take our little brush and come in and deposit shadows. More shadows. and that paint is thick on there, we're moving it around, it becomes really dimensional. Look at that. It's like the shape of a petal. I don't do encaustic, and I personally am not like a huge lover of encaustic. However, I do love thick paint in certain areas for dimension. I do have a deep respect of encaustic artists, though. All right. I'm going to take this periwinkle. I love the way that periwinkle functions to make your eye like really differentiate between where that color is and what's next to it. It makes me think of the Impressionist. And I kind of like making works like the Impressionist. I think of like Bonnard or Monet, especially his early stuff. It was really messy, rudimentary as he was developing his technique. But see how this, especially the green against that periwinkle, is really popping. And then I'm going to mix a little bit of that periwinkle and pick up some of that warm gray also. I'm going to pick up this olive tone, kind of work the edges of the composition, and some Titan green, right? Because our light source is over here. Light, highlights, highlights. The light is coming from over here. Light. I mean, I would say it's probably considered more advanced to consider to think about your light source, but it's good to start noticing that. Like when you look at something, where is the natural light? How is the light falling across the surface? Whether it's a petal or a table or whatever. All right. I'm thinking I want to soften this line. I just don't like it feeling so dark right there. And when I say soften, I'm going to go in with an even bolder color. And I also really appreciate line work and what can be achieved with line work. It goes hand in hand with layers. I also might blend these fields a little bit using lines. What if the shadow is dramatically blue against this rich red? And it kind of blurs the field between pot and surface. Ooh, that's delightful. Okay. And then what if we actually, so I'm loving this blue suddenly. So I'm going back into this pot and adding some linear, some fine line work. And I might soften this line. See how I did that? It's almost like a magic eraser. Not really, but sort of. And I'm not liking this division here. So what if I go in and bring down the petal a little bit? And now I'm thinking, I want something different with the background. What do I want? Let's look at the colors that we've got here. You know what? This is so classic me right now. I'm really loving the stark contrast of a black background. We might not do the whole thing, but we're going to go in and do it selectively. So I think about this is in shadow, right? You know, I'm not going up against all the edges, but I am creating just more depth. It's really all about just sticking with it and creating depth. And you know, sometimes you get to the end of a thing and you're like, whoa, this is a mess. Great, whatever. It doesn't have to be great. Great, it doesn't have to be great. I think the greatest lesson in these exercises is learning new parts of ourselves and having a safe space to be challenged to go a little further. All right, let's get that ruffle out of the way. So with bulbous, blobby flowers, having this sharp edge can really give it more definition. I mean, look how that just took a better shape. And to be honest, I'm loving some of this scribbly quality. So when I come back with my brush to move that pigment around, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to blur that out some. Like, get messy, leave little spots. See if you can soften your gaze, trust where your mind's eye is taking you. Sorry, I'm real allergy-ish today. And I do want a little more depth. A little more black here. I want it to be richer. And I might actually even go in with that Payne's gray, that Van Dyke red, and a touch of the violet. Because, ooh, look at that. Oh my God, I hope you can see it on camera. It just gave it such lush depth right there. Especially against those berries. Okay, and we're going to just kind of selectively do this some more. I've got the paint here, I want to use it. I hope you can see what depth this is creating. Wow. And I'm just going to make some little gestures through here too. It's just pulling the depth through. I wish I had a word counter on how many times I have said depth. That's deep. Okay. I just dipped my brush in a little bit of water. I'm loving this kind of inky shade. It's really that Payne's gray watered down a little bit. Let's come in here with that periwinkle. I mean, why not? And see how I just left this area? It suggests that there's a shadow, and I love that too. It's like, what else is going on here? Is the light dappley? We are getting so close, my friends. How do you know when something is done? It feels exciting to me. That's how I know. I feel an excitement welling inside of me. And it feels, yeah, it just feels like it for me. But that's, you know, many, many years of building the practice and the trust. I'm barely pulling some of this periwinkle through here. And you know, we've got this. We can just merge these fields here, just barely. And take my straight brush. This is going to be our last mark. By golly. And we're done. All right. If you have painted along with me, please email Morgan at ruggedandfancy.com. I'd love to see what you created.